This is the link now.
Yeah, ma'am, just.
लिंक नहीं आ रहा क्या? Is this link working? Is this link?
Oh, you are here.
You can please check the
This
link.
link is working.
Yeah. Could you please access?
I'm checking.
It is on.
Yeah, it is working.
Is it working? Okay.
It is working. The new link.
Okay.
I hope, ma'am, that's fine. Fine.
Should we start?
Yeah. We can start. Is it working? Yeah, it's direct.
Beta, the second link is working. I sent you the hello. Beta, I've sent you the second link. Please circulate that. The first one is not working. Okay, okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. It was supposed to be a good morning. It's now good afternoon. No wonder we are here on a very, very interesting day, and one of the best speakers, one of the best knowledgeable persons, one of the most resourceful persons in the area of data protection in this country is right before us today. We are very thankful of him that he's been so cooperative to have joined here today. So this is Mr. Salman Waris. I'll just read out a brief profile of his. Mr. Waris graduated as a lawyer from the Aligarh Muslim University, AMU, and obtained an LLM from the University of Essex. Also specializing in media and communication laws, information technology law, and e-commerce law via the University of Oxford's program in comparative media law and policy. At present, Mr. Salman is RegTech program co-chair at the Big Innovation Center, which is an exclusive technology and innovation network of global leaders and regulators that work on artificial intelligence and blockchain. He has been a vice chair of the International Technology Law Association Data Protection Committee and a member of the Task Force on Internet and Cyber Security at the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, IDSA, and the Data Security Council of India. Thought Leadership Development Program. He has advised Department of Electronics and IT, Ministry of Communications and Information Technology, and Director General of Information Systems, Ministry of Defense, Government of India. He is a regular speaker at various industry conferences. Mr. Waris has been quoted by publications including Financial Times, UK, Washington Post, New York Times, Reuters, Asia Financial, S&P Global Market Intelligence, Al Jazeera, India Business Law Journal, E-Finance and Payments Law Policy and Journal, Law and Policy Journal, UK, Asia Pacific Defense Forum Magazine, the Financial Express, the Economic Times, the Indian Express, the Times of India, Business Standard, the Mint, TNT Finance UK, UK Data Protection Journal, etc., etc. Data protection is the process of, as you know, safeguarding information from corruption, compromise, or even loss. The importance of data protection increases as the amount of data created and stored continues to grow at unprecedented levels. It is an interesting and absorbing area indeed for lawyers and policymakers, both at the private or individual levels, as well as that of the state or even at international levels. And hence, without sparing any more time, I would request Mr. Waris to speak with his immaculate experience and expertise. We would surely like to take your questions at the end of the talk, one by one. Thank you. If I could leave the days to you, sir. Thank you.
I don't know if I need to use the dice, but firstly, a very deep thank you from the depth of my heart for you to be waiting for almost an hour. I think some of you have been waiting for almost an hour. I know it's not really professional to arrive so late, but today was one of those one-day mornings where I faced multiple challenges, and also I had the fact that I was traveling from Noida. We had actually 3 different traffic jams on the way. So as I was explaining to ma'am that caused the delay. So what I'll try to do is, as I've also mentioned to your professors, that I would want to keep this as interactive as possible. I'll just speak for 5 minutes about the history and some facts about the data protection law in India or the regulation, and then I'll leave the floor to you. You are going to decide what you want me to speak about, what you want to hear, and maybe you can go about it by one, and then you can take forward accordingly. From the perspective of data protection law, I don't know if many of you have followed the genesis of the legislation, but the fact is that this is one of those legislation, and I often say this, that's been longest in the making. When they first started debating about Information Technology Act, this was way back in the late 2000s, they actually were trying to provide for an allay affairs of European and American companies that were outsourcing data. At that point of time, India was becoming a call center and outsourcing hub, and there were a lot of fears that a lot of personal data was being outsourced to India, and there was no law for protecting it, or there was no regulation to sort of deal with breaches. So that's when that law was thought about. But ultimately what happened was that when actually the IT Act came about, it did not have any provision relating to data theft or data protection, and it became, or it turned into an e-commerce law rather than actually a law to prevent data theft or privacy violations. So subsequently, of course, there was in 2007, there was a private members bill which was first introduced in the parliament. And that was a law which was known as the Privacy Act. It was introduced by one of the parliamentarians, and it stayed on the parliament agenda for almost 10 years, but was never taken up, never discussed. So it died its own death. In sincere, the legislative action began in 2012, when the previous government, under the Ministry of Personnel, talked about having a separate data privacy law or a law on data protection. That legislation was, or a draft was worked out, but before it could be actually put before the parliament or even see the light of the day, the draft went around circulating in different ministries because there were multiple ministries involved. And it finally, there was a change in the government, so the new government obviously started a new exercise. And it so happened that it was the Supreme Court's decision in the Justice Kuttoswamy case that kind of pushed the government, and they had no escape. So that's when they, in sincerity, set up the Shri Krishna Committee, and they proposed a draft law So effectively, since 2017, it's the actual process that began. And I'm sure as many of you would have been following it since then, we have had two drafts of the law, and of course, even now, the one that is going to be sort of put in the parliament or introduced in the parliament, hopefully in the next few days, is very different from what it was originally proposed by Justice Sri Krishna. So that's a brief history of the legislation itself. But what's interesting is the emerging issues and challenges that have sort of evolved in the last 5 years since the present legislation actually was put into drafting stage. I mean, with the latest development technology in terms of Chat GPT and AI and blockchain, I think we have probably delayed the legislation too far, because there's already so much change in the technology that the existing document that we are currently debating or going to be debating in the parliament is probably going to fall short. But that's the beauty of technology law, and the fact that actually sort of forced me to take it up, because you have to always keep on your toes, and you have to always interpret laws which are not made for the time that they are or for the technology, but they've been made in the past, and they are being applicable to a new circumstances. And you're always put to the test to interpret the law in the best possible manner so as to give a solution to the client. There was once a time, I mean, we are debating another legislation called the gaming legislation, and India has recently sort of somehow approved skill-based gaming online. So in 2007, when one of my clients first approached us with regard to that time, there was no legislation. There was only the Public Gambling Act of 1892, which was a British legislation talking about gambling rather than online gaming. Now we had to sort of interpret that in light of the technology that was available, and this was just before IPL started. And the fact was that when I went up to my seniors, I was a first year associate, and they said, I told them that there is no law and they can't do this, what they're planning to do. And so the managing partner at the firm which I was working with then said, Salman, people do not come to you to hear that you can't do this. Anybody can read the legislation or the act, and they can decide what they have to do or not to do. They come to you for a solution. So a good lawyer is somebody who offers a solution to a client. You have to interpret the law in a way, in a manner where you offer a solution. Obviously, there could be risk involved, and that's where the client has to take a business call, if he wants to take that risk or not. So with that in mind, then I reworked on it, and I'm happy to share that at that point of time, we advised some of the biggest gaming companies in the world in that very short period of a couple of years, and we offered a solution which I realized ultimately went halfway around the world, and about 6 or 7 months down the line, it came back to me for verification. So what had happened was we offered that business structure to a particular client, and somehow it went into the industry, and then there was somebody else, another very big player from the US, who were looking at entering India, and they wanted to verify if this structure is workable under Indian law. So it came back to me, and that's when I realized that it is the same structure that I had proposed 6 months ago to somebody else. So that's, it's kind of very satisfying as well, because then the industry is kind of acknowledging you. And I think that's what has kept me going. And some of the challenges that I see, even under the current legislation, though the government has made a very good effort in terms of bringing down the provisions, there are still issues with the conflict. And this has been a persistent thing with some of the technology-related legislations and regulations. The RBI has come out with their own guidelines on storage of data. The IT Act says something else. The telecom legislation or the telecom licensing regime talks about something else. SEBI talks about certain provisions relating to data storage. And now the data privacy legislation is talking about what has to be stored, how it has to be stored, and whether it can be exported outside or not. So there is extensive amount of ambiguity as well, because a lot of terms have not been defined. The government has now finally allowed, cross-border transfer of data, but there have been certain restrictions that have been placed on that. They've said that there will be a white list of countries to which the data can be transferred, but not every country. Now, who are these countries and what are the conditions on which the data can be transferred is not being discussed as yet. So that is where some of the complexities would lie. In the same manner, the RBI has, with regard to the banking data, they have made it a rule that that data has to be compulsorily stored in India. So there are going to be conflicts. So, and that's, I think, again, a very interesting and a challenging proposition for young lawyers or future lawyers like yourselves, because that's where you have to find solutions for your clients. And within those regulations, you have to offer a solution which will be workable. Obviously, there would be risk involved. You have to highlight those risks to the clients, but keep always in mind that the client comes to you for a solution and not for you to just interpret the law and tell them. So with that in mind, I'll stop here. Maybe I'll talk about a lot of other things later, but I'll take your questions. Come on.
Yeah, students, just ask questions. Feel
Has to be
free.
an interactive session.
I want this to be as interactive as possible. Frankly, I've not come here to sort of just read out the law or give you a gyan on legislations relating to data protection or anything. I want this to be as interactive, and don't hesitate, please. I would want you to sort of ask me any question that you have in mind, any doubts, and please feel free to ask. It's not necessary that it should be relating to the topic. If you want to ask me something about my journey or how I became a technology lawyer or what specializations that I do, and
I'll set the ball rolling.
please, ma'am.
You said that the data government going to determine those certain kind of could be transferred to.
Ma'am, that's a very, I would say, a very difficult question to answer at this stage, because the government has not identified those countries. One. And that's one of the challenges that I was highlighting, that within the existing proposed legislation, they have not, in the law itself, they have not highlighted which are going to be those countries. So,
What about the legal regime outside?
so
Are they
the
also?
only example that I can think of is from the European Union.
Ah,
So in EU, they have actually identified jurisdictions which are known as data safe countries. So these are jurisdictions which have similar or exactly the same laws with regard to data protection as the EU.
EU. So,
So
EU
they-
is the model.
EU is the model. In fact, our current legislation
Is
is
also
actually
based on-
modeled on the EU GDPR. So I think they would probably adopt the same criteria, that any country that has similar legislation relating to data, which is very similar to what India has, or the parameters in terms of data protection that are adopted under the Indian law, that would be sort of the country that would get that status. But it is confusing for the industry, because as of now, nobody knows.
Ah,
And this is going to be like, for example, the live case that I can give you is that of UK and Australia. India is currently negotiating a free trade agreement with the UK, and this is going to be part of that. And there has been an extensive debate about it. Similarly, is the case with Australia. We have a very strong cooperation with Australia under the Quad, which is Australia, US, India, and I think one other country, Japan. They have set up a group which is called the Quad, and they're collaborating. It's like an alternative to sort of counter China. So they're sort of collaborating extensively on data protection, on technology. In fact, just last week, the depth of that cooperation, I realized. I knew that they were doing it, but I was invited to the Australian High Commission's residence for a sit-in dinner, and there was, I think, somebody from Niti Aayog, somebody from the technology part of the current government, and a couple of others. Somebody from the free, one of the NGOs working on technology, and we had the ex-technology minister from Australia, and he just wanted to meet us simply because he wanted to understand where is India heading as far as technology, cybersecurity, and data is concerned. I can share this with you. Data is the new oil, I mean, I'm sure you would have heard of it. But the fact that, the depth of that statement lies in the fact that today India is becoming a Vishwaguru, not simply because of a lot of geopolitical things that we are doing, but also because of the fact the amount of data that we are sort of churning out and the data that we are holding as a country. That's why all big tech companies, they want to operate in India. The government today can actually negotiate with them in terms of the policies that the government is adopting. Simply because India has such a huge data market. So data is not only about data protection, it is also about data as a resource. So the new licensing regime that the government is also talking about is not just personal data. They're also looking at non-personal data. They're trying to use that as a resource to generate revenue for the government. So for example, your FASTag data, it's actually being sold by the government to companies that are dealing with maybe roadside assistance, that are dealing with insurance, that are dealing probably maybe in hospitality sector. They want to set up a eatery between 2 points on a highway. So they want to know what is the footfall. So that data is being stored. It is anonymized. It cannot identify you as a person, but that is what it is known as, non-personal data. So that is going to be a big resource in the future. And in fact, the earlier draft, which was subsequently amended, they amended it primarily because they wanted to bring non-personal data also under the data protection law.
I like to ask a couple of questions on this point, but I think students have got some questions for you. I'll request them to
Yeah.
ask.
So I was just going to come to the point that India, we are really a big market. But sir, there are so many cases like the Jamtara case. There are very much, and they are collecting this data of people phone number from the BPO industry that are working in the Delhi NCR only. So how much we are ready to cater the such problem, because India is really a big market and every day there are new software coming and they are taking data. They are promising that they are terms and condition and they are protecting data. But how we as a legal fraternity ready to cater the problem if there is some big issue coming regarding the theft of data or data being exported to other countries for any kind of terrorism activities. So what can be the instant solution that right now we are having apart from the law that is in making?
See, actually, it's a very good question. And frankly, this is one of our biggest concerns. While India in the last 2 3 decades has actually moved very quickly on the information superhighway, and we have become a technology, global technology superpower. But unfortunately, we have not been able to sort of adopt or have regulations. And also, not only that, I mean, you can have a regulation and a law, but if it is not properly implemented, it's useless because it does not serve the deterrent effect. I think something that I always say is that we need to develop a culture of privacy. Because today, even I as an individual does not realize when I'm sharing my data. Somebody comes to me on a red light and says, sir, this is a free package for you, a holiday package, why don't you fill this up? Or I'm filling up on a gas station, they ask me, sir, we are going to offer a hamper for a free holiday package or something. And I share my data, I share my number, I share my details, everything. Now that's all personally identifiable data. Your mobile number, your name, your address, and all that. And that actually goes on to sort of some of these things. A lot of the crimes and issues that are arising in the Jamtara case that you highlighted is because of the lack of a culture for privacy that we have as a society. We are not really understanding where and what we are sharing and what are the implications of this. You try and do this in Europe, they'll never give you their data. They'll say, this is my private data.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, where the problem lies. I mean, we can have legislations, we can have, laws, but if we are not able to develop that culture within us as a community, as a society, it will always be a problem. And it will always lead to issues like this. Majority of the scams that are happening now, through the mobile phones or through the payment apps is because of the data being shared, or us or our family members trying to download apps or even visiting websites where we do not realize what we are doing, and they then start collecting data. China is doing this as a geopolitical exercise. A lot of those Chinese apps that have just been banned earlier this week were basically data collecting apps. You know, once you download that app, even if you delete it later, there are certain apps that you can't even delete. You know, they would be working. You would allow access. So, and these are actually apps that are meant to what is called as data mining. Data mining is a complete industry. So that is where I think the problem lies. And I think it's not something that we can just blame the government for. It is us as a society, because probably the government needs to take more initiatives, but we need to start early. We need to start educating the children at the school level, and sensitize them about privacy, sensitize them about issues related to cybersecurity and stuff. I think NCRT has taken an initiative on school cybersecurity, but I think it has to be more, probably aggressively followed. So thanks, that was a good question. Yeah, sorry, you were saying something.
AI is a very hot topic right now, but like you said, there are apps where we allow access and then they can mine our data and collect our data. But AI is like a small brain of a computer, and I think it's not need also the access. If you have to open the website without access, it can steal your data and invade your privacy.
So I mean the best example of the most popular ChatGPT is one of those examples. So I mean, we don't realize as of now what is the model on which, because it's an open AI bot. So, but again, it poses its own threats, and there are serious issues.
My question is, how can we legally affect this if they are not asking access for our data?
See,
they can access our data because it's kind of an AI. They have their own intelligence.
that's right. Actually, that's actually a question for obviously discussions internationally as well, and it has been debated ever since ChatGPT. Conscious about what we are accessing, because sometimes what happens is you don't realize, but the websites actually seek consent for cookies.
Yeah. So that's
So the moment you access the website, they will first ask. There is a pop-up that would say, there's a cookie consent.
accept or
Now, because obviously you are so curious, and or probably for actually genuine research reasons or otherwise, you really want to access the website, you'll just accept it. The moment you do that, that's when you fall into that trap.
My question is, AI is like a separate person. If it becomes more advanced and it can access anyone's data without any of them, because it's only a computer, and we are with technology all the time, and it is technology itself. So how they will protect what the boundaries on the AI?
So there has been actually the current, especially with when you were introducing me. So you mentioned about the work that I'm doing at Big Innovation Center in the UK. That's a think tank which is actually talking about AI regulation, and also a regulation about the artificial intelligence as without consent, the exact topic that you're talking about. But as of now, there has not been any regulation on that. European Union is actually talking about it. So there is a draft in the process, but as such, no country has actually adopted regulations on specifically collection of data. Yeah, it is going to be a global threat, because the way ChatGPT is going, because it's learning on the move. Each time you put your query that you put in, it's actually going to be stored forever. So while today it might say that I don't have enough data to answer your query, but you look at the same query, maybe 6 months down the line, they will still give you a reply, because in this process they've already learned.
But the limit of ChatGPT information is set to end the 31st January of 2022. It cannot answer beyond that.
Exactly. So that is of the past, but from then to the future, they can always do it.
Interpretation.
Yeah.
That and the
Yeah.
business of
But
past data.
Because see, if you are
Sorry.
probably putting in a query today, and they are able to pick it up from that, from the current data, but in future somebody may actually feed in something which would add to the knowledge of the AI, and that could be a future reply to your question.
Yeah, but then again there is a conflict, Salman, between
It's a conflict of law issue.
also, like, you want access to the material, but then you have to say accept when cookies come. So you either
nothing like a
stop
free
that
lunch.
and make it open.
Exactly.
Because otherwise how is your data going to be protected? And data, personal, meaning even your health data, your personal life data, it cannot be just given away to everybody. So it is very scary.
It
And
is.
as I know, I think everybody would be knowing that we are having a talk here right now. Nothing is being protected. Nothing is being protected. We are all in
It's
the
open,
form of an open book.
Yeah,
It's like that.
that's true.
Yes.
I just want to add on to what ma'am had suggested, and you would indeed appreciate it, is that the fact that when they ask for cookies, well, they don't give it in a particular font. Like, look at the children, the aged ones. They are the most vulnerable. Some of them can't even, read because of the size of the font. They are not familiar with the language or the particular language at hand, right? So lots of such issues. So where do we go, right? That's one concern. The other one is, for example, we are using apps that are actually belonging to entities that are headquartered somewhere else. So as you rightly said, it's a conflict of laws. Now, there are different standards over there, and we are using it out here in India. So how do you reconcile?
So there are two aspects to that question. One is, of course, the aspect related to the fact that people are consenting without actually reading or understanding. So in that, I think there is a solution in the existing or the proposed draft of the data protection bill, where they have actually obligated organizations and intermediaries to put out their privacy policies and some of the notices in all the Indian languages. So that is one solution that is there.
Great.
So that's a positive step. But then from a compliance point of view, from an industry point of view, that's going to be a big problem. Because now they were earlier drafting one policy, but now they will have to put it, actually get it translated into all these Indian languages that are official Indian languages. So it's a kind of an added burden to them. But nevertheless, I think it's a bit of a solution that the government has thought about.
But don't you agree it's necessary as
No,
well?
it is required, especially in a country like India, which has such cultural diversity. There is a certain obligation, because a lot of times, majority of the issues that are happening with the mobiles and the apps are happening because people are not aware. So
Most of these applications may not be supporting any other language than English. So for them, compliance becomes a huge issue.
it is. I mean, that's one of the issues that we are debating with the industry. And that is actually one of the issues that have been highlighted by the industry in some of the consultations. That, I mean, okay, for a big organization like Microsoft or a Google, it might be a small cost. But for some of the startups, it's going to be a big cost. Then they're talking about data storage within India or data localization. Now, very good, we should have data localization. But then who's going to bear the cost of that data being stored in the cloud? Or, today, maybe yes, it's a newly incorporated organization. But 10 years down the line, the huge volumes of data that is going to be handling, and there is a requirement that it has to be stored for a certain period of time. So that cost will have to come on that, especially a startup that is doing some work in the particular industry. The other question that you talked about, I'm sorry, the second part of your question was...
Second part of my question was about the different standards that are having to be abided by an user, for example, or for the government concerned of the place where the user resides. So he has to deal with a different government or
So if
mandating
there are
a different standard.
apps that are sort of based outside India and they're targeting Indian customers. So
Right.
typically the Chinese apps, they're actually, the servers are based somewhere else. It's probably in China or somewhere, and they are targeting Indian customers. They are all probably maybe even in Hindi, just because they are made to sort of target Indian customers. So in those cases, what happens is either the government issues a blocking order, which the government has talked about under the amended IT rules, or if there is a crime already committed, then the IT Act actually gives extraterritorial rules about banning it here in India, prosecuting them here, and then obviously trying to prosecute the directors in the relevant jurisdiction. But that's a very long process, and
But
at
how do
times
you-
maybe not very effective as well.
Yeah, that's what, because it's all boiling down to enforcement. You have a jurisdiction for sure under the act, that's in the law, black letters, fine. How do you enforce it? Where do you go? Which is the forum you approach?
Exactly.
So technically, what happens in cybercrime cases, just like a lot of other cases, if there is a crime that is of national importance, or if there is been a hacking or something which has affected issues relating to national security, then if you are able to, the problem again with technology and technology law or cyber crimes is the identification of the originator of that particular, if it's a ransomware attack, or and most of the time they are located in countries like maybe Romania or some CIS country or somewhere in China. So that enforcement is a big issue, and then you can't even identify the individual. Now states or governments are using some of these cybercrime tools as weapons. So that's why they call them state actors. There are state supported organizations that are actually working on these issues. So it's actually it's going to be a challenging. There has been a talk about a global cybercrime legislation to deal with such issues.
Highly
but
ambitious.
yeah, it's very ambitious, and frankly, countries like China and other countries that are using this as a tool, they will not want to have that see-through. Any other questions?
Yeah, there's a question.
Rate of
Okay.
cybercrimes and the disposal of cybercrimes also. Even our
In India,
legal
yeah.
mechanism doesn't support even admissibility of those
Lot of
evidence.
those That's a fact. I mean, it's I can share an example with you that once we were dealing with a data theft case involving convincing the police, that there is a data that was stolen on a pen drive. And of course, this was a little while ago, so now they are more sensitized. But at that point of time, he said, I cannot register an FIR if I can't see something physically. So what we knew that data was being stolen. So there was this ex-employee who used to come at night at a particular time, and then she would, actually email the data to herself on a. So there was no physical evidence. So the policeman actually asked that you need to create physical evidence for me to be able to file an FIR. So then what we did was we had to the client had to actually enable pen drives on that particular system so that she could come and plug the pen drive and download the data on that pen drive. And then when she exited from the office, she was arrested outside the office. So, these are some of those practical challenges that happen. And frankly, yes, our agencies are not, really trained that much that they can deal with a lot of complicated cybercrimes. They have improved a lot in the last 10, 15 years, but still, I think there's a lot here with you, and it's again a very example. Encryption, the use of encryption beyond a certain level is prohibited in India. Now, if you have to use 256-bit encryption, though now it has been permitted, earlier it was not. You had to seek specific approval of the Department of Telecommunications. Without that, you could not use 256-bit encryption. At that point of time, all your Blackberries, your iPhones, they use 256-bit encryption, or the enterprise version actually does. So, for a company or a corporate to ensure their, security of their data, they were trying to use, encryption, but they can't because it's restricted. You have to seek prior approval of the DoT. Now, the process for seeking that prior approval, nobody knows. It has never been laid down. But then, finally, after much interactions and everything, it was realized that you have to put in a plain paper application to the DoT, and there is a particular department there. Now, in that plain paper application, you say that this is my license number is so and so, and I am availing this, and this is 256-bit. Please allow me to use 256-bit encryption for corporate communications. Now, this application actually has to be submitted because obviously, as a corporate, I'm not using the direct resources of the telecom service provider. The DoT. The DoT only has an agreement with the service provider, which is Airtel or somebody. So they restrict it through them. So when you go and tell Airtel that I need to use 256-bit encryption, they will say you need to get me a permission from DoT. So the DoT would say, no, you go to the service provider. Finally, you have to ultimately go back to the DOT, give this one plain paper application, and with that you have to submit the keys for decryption. Now, technically, that is not possible. If you are using an encryption software, you can't actually put those keys physically on a CD and submit it somewhere. It is dynamic. So, but there is a requirement and you need a permission. So, what you do is you put a blank CD along with that application. This is practical.
Many a times we do it. Yeah.
I can tell you this, and organizations have been pulling their hair. They have been going around running pillar to post how to be able to use this. And you put a blank CD, and all that happens is the DOT puts a stamp, and they even not even receive it. So you have to give it outside at the counter, and they will put a stamp of acknowledgement that that application has been received. That application you take to the Airtel or whoever is your service provider. They then allow you to use 256-bit encryption. So these are some of the practical steps. While the law is always there to sort of protect, but at the same time there are issues like these. So that we have faced these challenges at times.
I think somebody
Yeah.
here wants to ask you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, taking the example of United States, government surveillance.
Could you please tell your name first?
Sorry, sir, my name is Tony.
Yeah.
So the question to you is, taking the example of the United States, government surveillance of the citizens has always been a very controversial topic. So what are the applications in the Indian context, and to what extent does it comply with the individual right of privacy?
It's a very interesting question, a complicated one as well. So there has been this debate or an issue between civil society and the government. The government wants to have as much control or as much access to your information, and the civil society obviously wants to protect its privacy. Now, whether it's in countries like the US or here in India, I mean, currently we are facing the same situation here in India because some of the current regulations by the government, the IT rules, the amendments, and especially this whole push and pull by the big tech about some of these blocking orders or access to information by the government or content takedown orders is about this dilemma. How much should we allow the government to restrict, and where to draw the line? That's a difficult situation and a difficult question, and it's a very, very ongoing debate. In the US, what they have done is they have carved out exceptions, like the First Amendment exception, and there have been, various, landmark cases, especially by the American Civil Liberties Union, where they have talked about, exceptions to the individual's privacy. Happen in India as well, because we are also a democracy. So probably the judiciary would have to carve out exceptions, and they have done at times, like especially when you had the internet blockages or blackouts. I think the judiciary ultimately allowed in certain cases, they went against the government. So probably that's where we are going to see the evolution of the law, and obviously we would need, citizens, young citizens like yourselves, or even organizations working in the tech, field to challenge and to push. Like currently, there are multiple cases going on in the Supreme Court, especially with regard to WhatsApp. There's also multiple cases relating to Twitter, because most of these organizations have actually challenged some of the new rules. They have challenged some of the government regulations, and I think the law is going to evolve from there.
Now, when you talk about the law evolving through judicial decisions, that's rather, makes a citizen very insecure. You have to just
is.
wait.
Yeah.
Huh? So, don't you think it should come from the legislature itself? It should take care of the privacy of the people. We are a very vibrant democracy. I mean, we talk about US, okay? US is democratic also. We are the largest democracy of the world. So every time when you are talking to somebody or you're accessing the net, you're worried your data is gone. But then as you said, you want the information. Everybody's data is there now. Each one of us. You know about your personal life, your married life, your children, your boyfriend, your work, health issues, everything. And when we have cases like Apollo's case, yes, HIV disclosed to the person, and then the court said that because it was in public interest, it was allowed. Otherwise, the doctors are not going to even disclose what a person is suffering from. It is very, very private. So how are we going to deal with such situations?
I
You
think
know?
it's going to be, that's the beauty of law, and that's the beauty of technology.
It's
you know, like,
difficult.
especially that's the beauty of technology law.
Yeah.
But,
I agree,
it's very
Puttaswamy.
difficult. You know,
Huh.
I'll sort of try and answer the fact that, you know, while I do not agree with a lot of things that have happened of late in terms of technology regulation, and there are serious threats to, you know, privacy and some of the, you talked about, you know, healthcare data.
Yeah.
India has a healthcare. Similarly, there were issues with Aadhaar. You know, the government promised that it's going to be, you know, fail safe, and we have, you know, complete security. But some of the biggest data leaks were Aadhaar acknowledged by the government.
Yes.
There is still a case pending in the High Court
Yes,
with regard to
yes.
Aadhaar data leaks.
Yes.
So there are serious concerns, but at the same time, I think we must understand the fact that, you know, it's very difficult in any regulation to provide for all you know, aspects or implications relating to it, or you know, applications relating to it, and especially in a dynamic and ever evolving field like technology.
That's what.
So I think that's the beauty of the regulatory law and the court given law, that the courts then interpret the law in terms of the circumstances. And I do agree that at times the government tries to take advantage of this this gray area.
Exactly.
Because till the decision of the courts
Any
come,
government would try to take
and
advantage.
It's not particular to India.
Every
In US, they
government.
have done
Yes,
that.
yes.
I mean,
Definitely.
their, you know, I
Then
would say
again,
their
it's exercising
interception
control.
and
Yeah.
their you know, practices are more invasive than any country in the world.
Yes, yes.
So it's equally bad there in terms of the situation and the government's access to information there.
Yeah. After Puttaswamy's case, the right to privacy becoming a fundamental right. Okay. Now, many facets of privacy are going to come forward, but we just have to say how it has evolved through judicial decisions. Yes, homosexuality. You talk about the marriage. Now, marriage is also there. They want to get married. All these things are there, but it's a tough task. And I feel that the right to liberty, personal liberty, is going to be really affected through technology. It is being affected.
It is already being affected.
It is being affected,
We
and
don't
it is.
realize at times because you know, that's again one of the aspects relating to technology and its use. You may be currently under attack. You would not realize.
Yeah.
Your data would have already been compromised 6 months ago. It is
Yes.
only when that is discovered that you realize that, oh, my data was leaked, you know, in so and so year, and I lost all my personal details in so and so year.
Yeah.
I mean, it has happened with me.
Yeah. Yes,
There
yes,
was a
it
breach
happens.
on
Yes.
LinkedIn of you know, their passwords and everything, and it was only 3-4 years down the line when I was using a particular you know, website that actually tells you whether your password has been leaked online. That I got to know that my password was you know, leaked through LinkedIn. LinkedIn suffered a breach in so and so year, and that's where my LinkedIn password and my details on everything was breached. So I think it can happen to anybody, and that's where I think the scary part of the technology comes in. Any other questions? Yeah, please.
Questions, please.
The created thin line between data mining and data theft.
Okay.
And
So
secondly, as we know that the recent data protection bill 2020, it's not a bill, it's a legislation. It might be a bill. It might become a bill.
no, it will become a law. It is currently a bill.
It's a bill, it will become a law. So more power is given to the center as far as I've learned about it. How will it affect the right to information or the right of the citizen to collect the information, to access the citizen, access the information?
Okay. So I'll answer the second question first. The law is actually talking about certain amendments to the Right to Information Act. So that is very dangerous because it is carving out exceptions, which would actually blunt the effect of the Right to Information Act. So that is one of the biggest criticisms, and there are serious concerns. So I don't know if that provision would be retained or it would be it would be passed as it is. But if it is passed as it is, then it could be a serious, issue as far as the concept of the concept of right to information is concerned. With regard to data theft and data mining, data theft is where your information or a particular information is accessed without consent or illegally accessed. While data mining could be illegally done, it could also be done legally. For example, I am collecting data of my customers. Now, I have billions of customers across the world. Now, I want to identify who are the customers who are, probably looking for an iPhone, or what are their preferences with regard to a particular phone. To identify all those potential customers, I can be collecting all the data and then getting professionals to mine the preferences of my customers in terms of their choice of a particular operating system or preference to a particular phone technology or something to that effect. So that could be, it is broader. So it is both, it could be legal, it could be illegal as well. The illegal example I already gave with regard to, Chinese app, collecting data. So that data dump is being just stored, and then subsequently there are professionals who are just mining that data in order to collect information which could be probably used in future or even used in a cyber attack. There was somebody else who was raising a question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, hi, sir.
Do you think AI should be held criminally liable if it leads to a data breach? And for it to be held criminally liable, it would have to be ascribed a legal personality. So do you think it should be granted that state status?
Again, very interesting and a very difficult question. So it's been debated actually, but if I look at some of those examples, like for example, Saudi Arabia has given citizenship to one of those AI robots. So once you give citizenship, you give a legal entity. When you give a legal entity, then it comes with both rights and liabilities. So that could be a precursor to probably a reply to your question. But yes, it's still being debated and people are talking about it. Now, when you use that example in ChatGPT, when an AI bot can defend you in court, then it could be equally held responsible if it makes a mistake. And then now, of course, it's a different question. Who is responsible for that? No, obviously, it's just a bot. It doesn't have, whether, and it's an open. So with ChatGPT, it's another unique question because it's an open source.
Yeah.
If it was, yes, the competitor to ChatGPT, which is being developed by Google or Microsoft, then you could actually sue the company. But for ChatGPT, who are you going to sue? Because it's open source.
But ChatGPT is, I think, very bad for students.
Yes,
Students,
yeah, there is
it's going to kill creativity completely.
There is a whole debate.
And
about
what are we making out of the children then? Like a human capital, human resource. What are we going to do?
But I use ChatGPT as for research purposes in CRE also. But somewhere I feel it's useful.
No, it's useful. You just copy. You're not applying your mind. That is why it's useful.
You are
It's good.
becoming blunt. You are becoming blunt. You are being dependent on the machine. Are you getting it? Do you realize that? No, you are becoming blunt. It is not useful. It is
Yeah.
rather harmful for you.
Yeah.
So your brain has
Yeah.
been
Yeah,
a
ma'am has
gift
got-
by God to
Archana
use.
ma'am has got a question.
What we usually do is, and they also know it, that when we have this project evaluation and also research paper writing, some teachers give them this assignment. So we have this Canvas learning management system. We have inbuilt mechanism for them to submit their research papers, which is like turn it in inbuilt. So plagiarism is automatically checked.
Corrected.
So that is there. So I also have this question because since with ChatGPT and all, they will not be even knowing what they are writing about because they will ask ChatGPT, Professor, write me an essay on, corporate governance. So that essay will be there. But the question is,
Exactly. They are
it used to be
extracting the.
regulated by plagiarism softwares and all, Turnitin and all. What
Making
will
them
happen to contents being
My
created
students have
by
been
ChatGPT?
sitting in exam using a chat.
So yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, and actually, it's a very interesting debate that is currently ongoing online as well and everywhere else, because this is a concern of the academia. But at the same time, what he is saying as a student is also correct, that it has opened new horizons. Now, as with all forms of technology, there are going to be good uses of it, but also misuses of it. In this particular case, as of now, people are worried there are going to be more misuse than use. And it could kill creativity, it could make people dumb because they just, search.
Yeah,
But then
exactly.
ma'am actually, gave that alternative.
Uh,
That if it is going to be a plagiarism, then it will already be detected by, and there are actually already, there is already a
Yeah.
software tool which is able to identify, and especially correcting ChatGPT, products or work products. So, I mean, I think it's a balance in terms of ethics and in terms of, and frankly, as I said, the more important aspect is developing that culture, because we are adopting technology every day, whether it's the culture for privacy or whether it's culture. I think it's all about culture for ethics, because in countries like Japan and in other countries, they have very strong ethics. They would not try and misuse the technology, but they would try and use it for a good.
yeah, but it cannot happen in our country. You
But
know,
that
it's
is
a
that is our
dangerous.
responsibility. That is our responsibility as citizens, as students, as academia, to ensure that we develop that strong ethical culture.
You know, Salman, you are saying plagiarism will check. I agree plagiarism to some extent. But the student who is actually taking the material, he'll just take it somewhere. So he wouldn't even know what is written over there. He'll put it for the test and he'll give it.
Application of
Not
language is
zero. He will
I
not know
agree
what.
with that. I agree.
He will not know what is governance. He will not know what is corporate. He will not know
But then he will not be
anything.
able to get his way through it. That is what your concern is, that it should not pass off as work, as his work product. It will not. Because technology has already provided
That's what
a
I'm
tool.
saying.
So when
Cultural
he-
difference,
it
Salman.
would ultimately get corrected. He will not
Yeah.
get passed.
Salman, if students go to do LLM abroad, okay, there the teachers say that these 200 pages we want you to read in 2-3 days for our next class. Read and come. It is mandatory. The students read, okay. Here, nobody will read. That's the problem.
I
The
agree. That's why I
cultural
said it's a
difference is
culture.
there.
It's a cultural issue.
हाँ, cultural issue is there. आदत ही नहीं है पढ़ने की, स्कूल में भी नहीं है,
Yeah, you were saying
है ना?
something.
बहुत प्रॉब्लम होगी.
No, it's not replacing. Google is actually coming up with a Google version of ChatGPT. So actually, I mean, it's ChatGPT is just a name, but it's an AI bot. So anybody can actually do that, have that technology. So they're already coming up with a Google version of ChatGPT, and Microsoft has already done it. So I think the next 5 to 10 years is going to be very exciting in terms of AI. And I think the question that he asked is equally pertinent. Because ultimately AI could actually overtake a lot of
Times. So
it does
this,
happen with traffic. It happens.
yeah,
with me.
okay, it happened with me also today.
Because I was blindly following it.
Yes.
It took me to some other place and then I had to take a U-turn.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I used my intelligence. I said, I'm going in the wrong
That's
direction.
yes,
So I had
yeah,
to take a U-turn and then come back.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And many a times we find it with Google, Maps and all.
asking us to take a ride where there is no right.
Yeah.
There used to be a right turn once upon a time.
And
Yes,
also, they are
I know.
collecting data not only from cars, they are collecting data from bike users. They are collecting
Yeah,
data
yeah.
from people who are maybe, like even.
Yeah.
So a bike could go into a small alley, but a car cannot go there. That's
I
not
know.
allowed.
Yes.
And you bump into something, a rock or something, and then you find,
Yeah.
oh, there's no road out here.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a case of a sitting High Court judge of UK
Ask.
who and his wife, they died
Like
because they were blindly
also
following
having
Google
technology
Maps.
like
They had gone on a trip,
Amazon Alexa.
some of these, long
So
drive kind of
they are
trips,
connected with
weekend
most of the
trip,
applications.
long drive.
The only the
And
problem
then
is
they were,
we
there
have
was,
growing in technology,
certain
but
change in the
when
weather
it
in
comes
that
to
area,
compliance, when it
and
comes
there were
to
very heavy rains
issue
and
where
flooding.
we can cater the
Now, he was
power
driving
into
back,
data privacy.
but obviously
Okay.
since he was
We
not
are
familiar with the
zero,
road, so
like
he used Google Maps.
once we say
Now,
we
Google
the
Maps
fundamental
showed that
right,
there was a particular
and
road
the truth is
which
privacy is a
was
myth.
actually leading to his destination,
That's true.
and which was
Conflict.
completely
Very
empty.
conflicting.
But there were floods, that's why it was empty.
Ah.
And he drove into that road. They
Oh.
got stuck
See?
with water and they ultimately died. They could not come out of it.
Ah.
So that's
Scary.
worse. And this is about 2 years ago or maybe a year and a half ago. No, sorry, before COVID.
And who's going to sue who then? Google. He's got a couple of questions he
Yeah,
wants to
Yeah.
ask.
So like we're talking about creating a culture. So first of all, when mechanism, we can't make people
adhere to it.
adhere to it. Like we are a country, we honestly we are a largest country with the population also. Right now we are the first in the population, and we know with the very true with the fact that we have to teach people about the smallest and the slightest thing. And talking about technology, it's a very far. If everyone is using a mobile phone, but no one knows what are the repercussions that they are gonna face. So talking about like, what can be the first mechanism if someone is facing a data privacy, like I being a like I'm completing my law school and tomorrow a client is coming to me. So what can be the best solution I can give it to him, or can he approach to which forum? Like we know that only in Delhi NCR or a metropolitan political city like Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai, that there are teams that are really tech savvy and they are smart in catering the issues. But we have 27 different states that they are like very much far behind technology. Talking about Jamtara, so there have been team assigned where people from like IIT has been recruited for in the police department itself, but still people are not able to even arrest people. This kid, they are basically minors who are doing this thing, and they are getting this data from uh, this NCR only, this BPO industry. And also there are technology. If you're talking about development, we have this Alexa, Siri, so they are connected with the home appliances. So everywhere we are trapped, this trap. But what can be the first point of action where a human normal person, not talking about the companies like me, I think that my data is being theft, so where do I approach, and what can be the best way to resolve my issue?
See, I think again that's a difficult question to answer because unfortunately, you know, while we have as a country grown in technology, as I mentioned, but we have not been able to develop the support system around it.
Exactly.
And as far as the culture itself is concerned, I agree with your observation that it'll probably flow from the government. So not only the fact that the government is making the law, but the government has to take proactive steps in terms of implementing the law.
Exactly.
So not just from the enforcement agencies, but also in corporates, educational institutions, and society at large. So, if I can give an example, earlier when mobiles came, there was no KYC.
No.
Everybody could buy a mobile. All you had to do was, you know, pay for the SIM and you could buy it. Then came, you had to give some kind of an identity proof. Then now there is such a strict KYC. Then even the KYC was not enough.
Yeah.
So now you have to do even biometrics.
Biometrics.
And even after that, there are issues. So you have to do that once in a while. They say that after every year or 2 years, you have to again submit your KYC, especially in the banks.
Banks, yes.
So we developed that culture. These are small steps, but they went a long way in developing that KYC culture or that identity verification culture. It it came down from the government. So that is how, because the government regulated it, they obligated the telecom service providers to ensure that they have, because if they don't collect it, they are going to be responsible. So I think that is what probably we need with regard to, whether it's cyber sensitization or privacy or data protection. Something similar, and some similar steps have to be taken by the government. They have to obligate the service providers. So when each time we avail those services, whether access to information or doing a search through ChatGPT or some other intermediary, the intermediary has to obligate and ensure that they know what is at risk. If we are accessing that information, how much data they are availing of us, or how much data they are collecting of us. So that is probably one aspect of it. The other aspect with regard to, the fact that even now, in spite of having IIT people in police force, they are not able to prosecute. It is actually a complex problem. There is not a easy solution because there is one thing is to having the knowledge and the technology, and that's what I mentioned about the international ramifications of a data theft or something. The other is practically implementing it. Now, As far as I understand, with regard to the Jamtara problem, the issue is with the local enforcement. You could have somebody from CBI actually identify, or an IIT person in the cyber wing of a particular police station identify that this originated in Jamtara, but who did it? Ultimately, they have to secure a warrant, and ultimately, it's the local police
Exactly.
that has to go and enforce it.
Yes.
Even if these guys want to go and arrest, they'll still have to involve the local police.
Mm-hmm.
And since the local police, it is alleged, is involved and they are benefiting from that trade, so they would tip them off.
Hmm.
And that happens with a lot of other
It
crimes,
happens.
whether it's not just specifically to IT crimes. I think it happens with liquor, it happens with drugs. That the local police is kind of providing an informal protection to those criminals, or somebody in the local police is providing that. So if there is a tip off, everybody vanishes. So that's where the challenge is, whether it's technology or anything else. As us as citizens, how we can do it is probably, I think, if we have that KYC kind of norms where the service providers themselves are obligated to ensure that we know what we are sharing. I think that would help a lot.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Any other questions, students?
Hungry for lunch.
Okay.
Even
Thank
you
you
must
so much. You have
be.
been an interesting audience.
Yes, yes,
And,
sir.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Pleasure interacting with you.
Yeah.
Look forward to sort of keeping
Should
in
I?
touch.
Should I go? Yeah. Why don't you do it? Sure. Okay. I thought you could.
Few words for this.
Been happy if I can come to say a few words.
Ma'am, just one, I will come after you.
Okay, on behalf of the governing body and the dignitaries of the university, Archana ma'am, faculty members, and dear students, we really thank wholeheartedly Salman Waris for agreeing to have come here, and he's given us a very, very interesting interactive session, and I'm glad that students participated and asked questions, because it's for you that such events are organized. And of course, we also learn a lot through you and with you. But then you are actually the real stakeholders, and you are going to finish law and go into the mainstream. So Salman has talked, in detail about data protection, and he talked about the history, and he also took questions one after the other, and he's cautioned us that there are still very many issues to be dealt with, which time will show, and the judiciary has to play a very important role in preserving democracy, preserving our personal data, and making us feel secure that nobody is going to steal our data, and also that the dignity that has been promised to us under the Constitution of India, whether through the preamble, whether through Article 14 on equality, or Article 19 or 21, right to life and personal liberty, all these principles and doctrines are preserved through the governance that we'll see in the years to come and the days to come. So with this, I thank you, Salmanji, once again, and we hope to have many such sessions in future, and maybe more workshops as we move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me also take this opportunity to primarily address the students, and because when I was listening to sir, I was listening to him about such an emerging area, and also as you can see, our speaker kept on insisting on need for a sensitization. I think the sensitization starts right from here, from this room itself, and also to let sir know about the fact that some of these students have already completed a course in cyber law. And I think you should be able to connect your course, the contents of your course with what is being discussed today. And ma'am has very rightly concluded and summed up what our speaker was talking about it today. And I think high time that we should deliberate on these issues. Sir will be seeking your guidance again to, as ma'am suggested, to come forward with a kind of a workshop so that we can take these issues forward. I think there are a lot of gaps. 5 years had been very, very crucial with regard to expansion of the legal regime with regard to data protection. And in his initial speech, sir was talking about it. So looking forward to more and more of such deliberations and your involvement in taking these issues forward. So thank you, sir, so much for coming forward in spite of all these hassles that you had to take up. Traffic is something, again, unpredictable. Like we talk about data protection and the access to data.
That too on a Monday morning.
That too on a Monday morning. So thank you so much for joining us today. So we look forward to your participation and your visit to NorthCap University again in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
Just a small thing on the aspect about the workshop. So, I don't know many of you would know this or not. 28th of January was the Data Protection Day. So our firm actually started a series on data protection. We conducted an international roundtable, virtual roundtable on data protection on the 28th. And this is the second event I thought which I could sort of highlight. But we are going to be doing another, webinar with international speakers next week. So I'll probably share the link with ma'am and maybe it can be shared with you. You can attend that. It's going to be very interesting because you would have, like in the previous one, we had people from India, we had people from Middle East, we had people from Europe, and all really very highly qualified experts talking about some of those emerging issues relating to what we discussed and some of the ethical and other questions, but also from a practical perspective. Because some of the companies, their general counsels were there as well. So, and in future, we are actually going to have some of the other stakeholders, like people from the Indian Police Services, who are going to be discussing. We probably also have a High Court judge sort of speak as well in one of the sessions. So this whole month we are doing a series. So I'll be happy to share the links and maybe we can do that. And obviously, I'm always welcome to, will be more than happy to sort of come here and interact with you people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let's have a last round of applause for sir. This is a really intriguing event. Thank you. Thank you all for having borne this for not